My name's Drew Edwards. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Pangea Educational Development. We're an NGO that's been working in Uganda and most recently also in the United States since COVID started. We decided to join the RME network because we saw a need for collaboration in order to address the complicated issues that face refugees in education. While we as an organization are making Herculean efforts, so are other folks in the realms of academia, so are other folks in other organizations in other countries, and there's so much that we could live and learn from each other. And so we wanted to bring that to the network and gain that from the network. So our mission is to help learners find purpose through creating cultures of literacy. And what that means is we're focused on education, we're focused on learning, but we're focused on one of the core foundational cornerstones of that, which is literacy. And so one of our goals is to help learners learn the critical skill of literacy so that they can continue to pursue whatever is important or meaningful or interesting to them in their own education. Pangea began 10 years ago. And when we started in post-conflict Uganda, and we were focusing on access to education. And up until that time, what we and the rest of the international community knew was that when you placed a school in a community, it equated to literacy and a meaningful education. At the end of the Millennium Development Goals, we learned that that was not the case, and something called the global learning crisis, where the quality of education in schools was not equating to the outcome that we'd intended. We began to focus on literacy and the quality of education to try to be an answer to what was happening both in the classroom, but outside of the classroom in the communities and in homes around the world. What that looks like for us is working in each sphere of a child's life. One of those is what happens in the classroom, and we focus on teacher training and equipping teachers to teach literacy in their own classrooms. The other ones focus on getting books into homes, and we have mobile libraries that help bring books to homes on a regular basis, where many libraries aren't within access. But also we've started our own publishing company to try to get more books that are locally representative and that are relevant to readers into the economies, schools, and homes of the communities that they live in. So when we started our local language publishing company, Uganda is a country with 54 different languages, and we started publishing in 9, which is a lift in itself. And then right around the same time, we did begin working in refugee camps. So as the South Sudanese conflict and the conflict in the Eastern Congo kind of caught fire and emerged from 2013 through 15 while we were shifting our mission, we've also shifted from post-conflict back into the active conflict and emergency education area. And so while we were distributing books and kind of running some of our programs in one of the camps in northwestern Uganda, I was connecting with a couple community members, and one of the elders in the community had mentioned, we heard that you're doing really great work with Ugandan folklore and with Ugandan stories that are reflective of their experience here, but why haven't you done that with refugees? And I remember sitting in the moment saying, I can't believe we didn't even think of this. And it was one of our blind sides, but one of the things that we learned, and one of the things that he communicated to me, was that this concept of identity, this concept of cultural preservation, is all the more important to refugee communities because they're displaced and their kids are learning outside of their communities. And when that became a harsh but also important realization for us to recognize that for this camp, these South Sudanese grandparents and parents wanted their kids to be South Sudanese and to grow up and with their culture and to preserve that and to be that. We had to make a shift in our programming, and we since have done that and hired full-time staff that are now developing text for that community. Yeah, COVID has affected all of our work and all of our communities' lives since the moment that it began. We were fortunate to work in a country that was very proactive about preventing it. The Uganda Ministry of Health and the President's Office did a great job. They closed schools and they shut down the country before there was even a single case in the country. I think just like them and ourselves at the time, and maybe the rest of the world, we thought this was only going to be for a few months. What we're now finding is that it's going to be a lot more protracted than we initially thought. And this is going to have it has significant impacts on the communities you work with. And if you look at, the Ugandan economy writ large is a largely informal economy, right? And so there are not guarantees for salary and payments for folks to be able to continue to feed their families. And so some of the immediate needs have risen to surface. The other side is that kids are out of school completely, most of them without access to materials at all for learning. And so one of the challenges that we're seeing is, not only how do you help families survive, but how do you help children continue to learn, because their bodies and their minds are growing regardless of if the pandemic is going on or not. And so one of the challenges we've tried to figure out is how to meet those folks. And that couldn't be more complicated than in the refugee camp. One thing that we've been talking about quite a bit recently is the already complicated nature of our broken system that we were trying to serve before this doesn't go away because of the pandemic. It's just compounded. And so, in the refugee camps, food rations have been cut up to 30%. And so families are now trying to find places and ways that they can farm to provide their own food for their family, but they're also going to be employing their kids to help with that. And that's a reasonable ask. And so one thing that we've been trying to do is just meet kids with where they're at with that. And that's designing activities around home-based learning. It's designing activities around what they're doing in these gardens. And so we've made a shift to trying to meet families, I think, in that moment right now. But the potential outcomes, depending on how this all ends, are dramatic. And then maybe the largest setback to education that we've seen in a century. I mean, UNESCO just released a statement saying that up to 6 months out of education or out of school for kids in most of these environments are going to equal a 1.5 years setback in learning, and possibly up to 10 years. And so, one of these questions are like, what is that going to mean if it extends beyond 6 months, let alone dealing with the 6 months? I mean, the gap and the chasm that's already existed in inequality is only going to expand greater and farther right now. So we're scrambling to try to keep up, but we also have an opportunity maybe to respond and have an educational renaissance. I mean, I think this is a time where we have to look at all of the regulations and, and structures that we have and say, how can we rethink education right now? And there's a great opportunity to do that. If I had 3 needs to be met right now, a wish list, if you will, I think that wish list would have to include, first and foremost, we're all struggling with funding. And I think connecting with foundations and folks who are interested in educational innovation in this moment and trying to meet communities with where they're at, to stop the bleeding, if you will, to kind of triage the situation. Every organization I work with is struggling with the same thing. And so I think that the funding piece is not insignificant, and it's not just because we always need funding. It's because we need to get these materials and we need to deliver education in innovative and different ways than we have before. And as a result, we need money in order to do that. You have to pay money to use radio waves. You have to pay money to print books. You have to pay money to deliver them. And so we badly need, I think, help with the funding, first and foremost. I think second, we need collaborators. I think the thing is, if we're not all learning together in this moment, we are all going to fall far short. And so we're looking for other collaborators, whether that's being part of networks like the RME network, of other practitioners. We want to know what's working for them. We want to know what's not working for them. We don't have time to experiment. We kind of have to iterate together and move forward and collaborate together. We also need help across sectors, right? And so working with a lot of the folks who are doing incredible job in research and learning what we're learning in this moment, but also helping us respond faster than anybody's used to, right? So we need to do more iterative research in the process. And I think that probably bleeds into number 3, which is we need help. We need help with what we're learning and what we're researching right now. Because if we're not measuring and understanding what's being done, 1, it may not even be done, but 2, we may not learn how we're going to have to respond in the next 3 months and the 3 months after that, because at this moment in time, we do not know when this is going to end. And so it is incumbent upon all organizations to come together and figure out most effective responses to continuing and changing education in this moment. And if we don't come together, if we don't have the funding, and if we aren't intentional about the learning that needs to take place and that is taking place every day, every week, every month, it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. A lot of folks in our network work on the academic side. And so, part of the academic side are the institutional and the administrative side. And one of the questions every school, every educational institution needs to answer is, what are you doing for refugees in this moment? What are you doing for all learners in this moment? How do we guarantee that we're not simply financially solvent and better off in the long term, but how are we guaranteeing that no one's falling behind in the immediate term? That's one side. I think the other side is we have incredible researchers and academics in these academic institutions. And one of the things that's difficult about research is it just takes time. And so while I'm sure so many academics have so many projects that are going on and probably going to continue going on, what is the opportunity for your research in this moment to contribute to radical transformations in education? And how can you reframe that to work with us? A lot of practitioners are looking for the guidance of researchers, and we're also looking to work through this challenge together.